All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen, to another open live Q&A. If you have some math questions, then feel free to go to brianmclogan.com /Q&A. Or if you just have some general questions for us in the United States, this is kind of one of those like lonely weekends coming up. It's one of those short weeks. So I know probably many of you do not have a test. I don't think I would ever give a test on this upcoming week. So you probably don't have many questions that are pressing. However, once we get back after Thanksgiving, then it's kind of crunch time until we get into the midterms. So there's going to be a lot of prepping and planning and preparing. And so I want to wish you a little bit of best of luck for going into getting ready for that studying kind of season. And I'm looking forward to making some content to help you guys out with those midterms. So I will have some videos coming up on that. But the purpose of this live stream is obviously to be able to answer any questions you guys have going on. So if you have anything related to math, then feel free just to put it down into the chat and I'll be able to pull it up and answer your question at least the best way that I can. However, if you do have like a math specific problem, I prefer you don't put it inside of the chat because then a lot of times it's just more difficult for me to be able to copy down. But I am excited to do some math problems if you guys have anything that I can do, because I'm excited because I am a devout Lions fan and it's just been really, really fun every single Sunday to be able to watch them win. So for any of you that are aware of the Lions, they have perpetually been the worst team in the NFL. And I can relate to that is kind of like feeling like math. It's like for those of you that take math and you're like, man, I hate my math class every single year. Nobody ever makes it fun. I always feel like I always suck at it and stuff like that. That's what's kind of being like a Lions fan. They just every single year, even though you want them to be good and you want them to, have success, they never did. And they always would just sometimes have like a good run. You think maybe this is the year we might have something. And then they would just stink it up or they'd always lose the game. And it was just over and over and over. And you start to internalize that, like, we're never going to be good. We're just always going to be the bad Lions. And then through these last couple of years, they've had a change in their mindset, basically with their leadership, and they've changed and they've turned things around. And they no longer believe in a lot of those stereotypes of these are the same old Lions. Like, we are changing things. And I know it's a lot easier said than done to just say, oh, don't stop claiming or pretending that you're not good at math and you're going to start being better at math. I get that. It's not just that simple easy, but it can be done. It just makes me motivated because you can see that people, organizations, sports teams, they can change things around. And yes, as a struggling math student, I could consider myself a lot of times had the same thoughts, probably like a lot of you. And it did take a lot of work. It's not anything that easy that it's like, oh, just, put in a little bit extra work here or find a tutor or, whatever else. And things are now going to be better. It takes work and it takes dedicated persistence on overcoming some of the obstacles that you might have had for years and years. But the cool thing about learning math, not talking about the Lions, the cool thing about learning math is it's a year-long journey. And so you can never feel like giving up. You always have the opportunity to continue learning. Yeah, the end of the year eventually stops. Grades are eventually due, but there's nobody here to stop you from learning. So I don't know why I went on that little rant. The Lions won, so I just kind of turned it into something there. But I'm going to see you guys on here. And hello, sir. And Gabe, good to have you back on. Everything is doing well. Hey, can you go over finding the domain and range of functions for pre-calculus? So here's the thing. Please go and submit that to brianmclogan.com /Q&A. The reason why is because after I kind of answer some of the questions inside the chat, I am going to pull up that Google form and I am going to go off of those questions. I might be able to, depending on the chat, but more likely than not, most of the time I get a decent amount of chat. It's kind of hard for me to go back to those questions. So even if you don't want to stay on for the whole stream, you'll be able to know, oh, at the end of the stream, he went over these questions that were submitted on the Google form. So that's why I always ask for any kind of math questions. I always do that at the end of the stream. So submit them to brianmclogan.com /Q&A. The link is also in the description of this video. And therefore, that's the easiest way for me to be able to get to your guys' questions. I'm here from a video you made 11 years ago. Wow, that's crazy. You know what? I can't wait till there's eventually, it's already happened, but I think it's gonna be really cool that I'm gonna be continuing making videos. And actually, it already happened. It was my last year of teaching, and students had been, well, no, yeah, no, they weren't that old. They're as old as when I was been teaching. I've been teaching as long as they were alive. That's cool. But pretty close now, actually, at the point where some students like now, I've been making videos for longer than people are alive, which is crazy. But I love saying that. How old are you? Oh yeah, I've been making videos longer than you're alive. I think it's awesome. Submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Hey, Alaska Trailmakers, good to have you on. Have an exam later. Where are you located? Are you located in the United States? I'm just kind of interested to see when your exam is. Obviously, if it was on this upcoming week or Thanksgiving week in the United States, that'd be brutal, but I hope it's doing all right. But maybe you might be all over the world. How would you approach functional word problems, questions in pre-calculus? I would need to have an example to help you out with that. I have a law cosines and law sines test coming up. Any recommendations to hit hard on these concepts? Anything else besides memorizing the formulas? Any of your videos you recommend? I have a lot of videos on law sines, law cosines. I think the main important thing is, once you go through the process of using them, they're not hard to remember. But I think the best advice I can give for law of sines, law of cosines is making sure you know when to apply them. Make sure you know kind of the caveats with the law of cosines. Because students can make a lot of mistakes with the going through on the, whoa, why is that so weird? I didn't even notice that. Sorry about that. Wow, that was huge. All right, let's start all that over. So I have law of sines, law of cosines tests coming up. Best of luck. Any recommendations to hit these concepts? Anything else besides memorizing the formulas? Any of your videos you recommend? So I have a lot of videos on this topic, but I think the main important thing that I would say that I have for you to recommend to you would be to making sure you understand the ambiguous case. That's almost certainly going to come up. So make sure you know how to approach the 1, 2, or no triangle situation. And then also when you're dealing with the law of cosines, just make sure you understand how to avoid that ambiguous case when using the law of cosines. So there's a lot of different scenarios based on what oblique triangle you're going to be given. I would do some practice problems, make sure you are comfortable with them, but then also just be aware of all those little situational situations that can come up when doing them. Is it possible to complete calculus 1, 2, 3 in 1 year? I guess anything is possible. It just depends on obviously your background and your motivation and the time that you have able to put forth things. I think as far as like a general advice for learning and absorbing information and being able to apply it, I wouldn't recommend like taking multiple courses on top of each other. You obviously want them to segue into the next course. So typically like 2 courses that go together in a year would probably be sufficient for most students. But again, this is general information that might not be applicable to you. So, but yeah, I would just have a conversation with your teacher, your parents, your counselor, professor, whatever may be the case, to kind of see what's the right fit for you. Am I a father? Yes, I am a father. I have 3 young daughters in school. So yeah, 2 of them are now already in elementary school, and one's just a little bit younger. What advice would you give to students taking pre-calculus honors accelerated? I think whenever you're taking an accelerated class, you need to understand it's accelerated. So what that means is you have to be able to put in the work. And I think one of the hardest things when I taught AP calculus, students like understood that it was difficult, but I'm like, it's kind of like an accelerated course. We're moving fast. And sometimes we're moving so fast, your brain doesn't have the time to absorb it. There are sometimes breaks, and I try to include them as much as we could as a teacher, but it's difficult. So make sure you're putting in that extra work outside of class. And then also make sure that you are completing all of the work. A lot of times students, just to save time, will just, sugarcoat or not do as much work, or might be the case just to be able to get through. It's an accelerated course for a reason. It's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of work requirement in there. So I think really just having a game plan for your time management to make sure that you can complete everything that is going to be required is going to be the most important. Hey, Araf, good to have you on. Hey, McLogan. Recently, I have been thinking about becoming a high school math teacher. That is very cool. That warms my soul. But I'm not quite sure if it's the right choice. Any advice? Yeah, it's not always the right choice for everybody. And I think I was always drawn to teaching. I mean, even when I was younger, I would coach students in wrestling. I just love the idea of helping people and getting them to become better versions of themselves. And so that was kind of like a natural ability of myself. But I'm not gonna lie, even when I got my degree and my first year of teaching, I wasn't sure if like being a math teacher was right for me. And I ended up staying 14 years inside the classroom, and there was a couple years that I literally was like, I think this might be my last year. Like I was just kind of over it. But there's always, with any occupation that you do, there's always going to be ups and downs, and the grass is not always greener on the other side. So I think what I would recommend is, obviously, when you go into an educational program, you're going to be immersed inside the classroom. And really kind of take how you feel about, teaching and classroom control and managing a classroom. Like, those are big things. It's not just about doing math. I mean, you really are working with people, and it's difficult because everybody brings in, so and called their own baggage every single day, and things change throughout the whole year. I mean, teaching is one of the most rewarding, sorry, teaching is the most rewarding job I have ever had. And I love it and I miss it for that reason. However, I also feel like, the time that I did inside the classroom was completed. Like, I feel I have closure with my time as an educator inside of the classroom. But I think in these kind of times when you are really trying to decide what it is you want to do, I think it's really, really important to have time alone and just to listen to your gut, just to kind of feel what seems right and try things out. Take little steps. Like I said, try sometimes if you can have some access inside the classroom or doing some tutoring, and just kind of feel like, do you get those feelings like, yeah, this is something that I want to invest more time doing? Because I will say, we need more high quality educators in this world, and we need teachers to stay being teachers longer than the 3 to 5 years. And it's okay if teaching ends up being not being your end of, you go into it and it just ends up not being the right fit for you. But I think it is really, really important to have those conversations with yourself to really see, like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I got to be all in. And if you don't feel like you're going to be all in, and this is ultimately why I left the classroom, because I'm like, I am not all in anymore um, in this profession, right? I had other things going on at my home life, obviously having our third daughter. I just kind of felt burnt out from, teaching for so many years and teaching the same stuff. I'm like, I'm not all in. I don't wake up excited to go to work anymore. I have to leave because the kids deserve so much more from me than what they're able to get. So that's why I stepped away from the classroom. And, so I think if you can dip your toes in a little bit and kind of get those elements and kind of see, does it feel like I'm all in, or if I'm, um, if I can be able to give 100% of my all, then give it a shot. And if it doesn't feel right, then don't force it, because our students deserve more. Do you have any tips for someone doing their first ever mocks next week? Quite panic for it. um, I think the most important thing is you just got to calm your nerves. Whenever we were taking a test, or anything else, and we have a lot of these nerves, if we're under stress and we have that anxiety going on, we're not going to be at our best. So I think you really need to do some techniques with some breathing, maybe some visualization. Really, really try to calm yourself down. I'm assuming all the prep work, you're not asking about preparing for the mocks. You've done the work that you need to do, right? Continue doing all the stuff. But I think one of the most underrated things we can talk about is going into any kind of assessment is being able to manage our mind. Calm yourself down, work on some slower breathing, close your eyes, work on some visualization, make sure you get a good night's rest. It's the little things that sometimes can have a really one of the most impactful elements on how you're going to perform. I need to take differential equations next semester. I got a B in calculus 1 and I got a C in calculus 2. I'm just struggling in calculus 3, but just had my third test. Yeah, sometimes things go down the way. And I don't want to attribute so much to your grades because, a lot of times a professor can have that varying ability if your grade's an A or a B, from on there. I think obviously when you get a B or a C, there's something you can point to that you don't have a strong, strong foundation of, right? And I remember when I first got a C in Calc 1 in college, and my mom wanted me to retake the class. And I'm like, no, mom, I am not retaking this class. Like, I understand all of the content. Obviously, there was mistakes I could point to on my tests and my quizzes of the reason the grade was what it was at the end of the year. But I'm like, I understand this stuff. Like, I corrected my stuff. I see why I made the mistake, but that was a snapshot in that time. I learned from those mistakes. And even though I wasn't able to bring my grade back up, I'm like, I feel confident in my understanding to move on. Right. And I did. And I think I ended up getting a B in Calc 2. And, but that's all as far as the calculus series that I had to go through for my degree. So, um, obviously, I think it's really important whenever you're not, even if you are getting an A, like it's all a lot. Your professor can have a lot big impact on that grade. So make sure you're going back through on how you got those grades and really truly trying to ask those questions of like, do I understand this stuff? And make sure you have that firm grasp because as you see in the calculus series, things are going to require that you have a certain set of knowledge. Otherwise, you're going to get exposed. So it's okay to struggle. Just make sure you understand where you're struggling and get the help that you need. If you have a math question, then go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I will do my best to answer the questions right after I get through your guys' comments on here. But yeah, I promise you, the link is in the description. Go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I will get to your guys' questions. Let's see if any of you guys, oh, it looks like I do have some questions. So cool. Good. Thank you guys. Awesome. So I'll try to do my best, my questions I can for you guys. I mean, I don't really have a favorite math equation, I guess I'd say. All right, let me answer this one. I've done my mocks and I'm worried I'm moving to foundation. If I do foundation, I can't get into the college I need to get into. I need to get to. Without that, cannot go to the university. Then I cannot get a job. I don't think I would put so much doom and gloom on everything. And obviously I know that there's consequences to where you are getting, with the mocks. But one thing I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream is like, don't ever allow one grade, one test, or one assessment to define who you are or what you're capable of. And yes, there might be some consequences on how you perform on the mocks, what college you get into, what university you go to, but that is not going to define who you are, what you're capable of, what job you can get, and how much money you can make. There are millions of people that are way more successful than people that have a higher, entrance exam score, right? So, do the best you can possibly do. But also there comes a point where it's like, accept consequences and then look to see what can I do about it. And I think that's something really, really important and something really, really hard for us to kind of accept and work through the lens of that, because we always want things to go the right way. We always want things to go the way that we envision them. But in the reality, life does not work like that. And we have to be able to have the ability to accept sometimes some defeat, accept sometimes some bad outcomes, and then to overcome them. So I want you to do your best. I want you to do everything that you know you need to do to put in the best effort for those mocks. But if you don't get exactly what you want now, just realize you have the rest of your life to prove yourself. And so don't give up. Don't allow a test or a score or a grade to say this is what you are destined for the rest of your life. Don't allow that grade to have that much power over you. You can achieve anything you want to achieve. And sometimes the roads are a little bit more difficult for the others than they are for you, or for you than maybe for others, but that's okay. We're all going to pave our own road. So I just wish you the best of luck, and just know that whatever happens, I don't know where I was going with this. Whatever happens, you're going to do your best and you're going to come out on the other side. I'll end it with that. Well, awesome, Connor. Going into Calc 1, doing pretty well on pre-calc and trig. I'd just like to know how noticeable the change in difficulty will be for the class compared to pre-calc trig. I don't know. I didn't teach a pre-calc trig. I mean, we taught pre-calculus and it was like trig. As far as I've looked, as far as like trig books and pre-calculus, a lot of them are very, very, very similar. So I think you would be just as well prepared on taking either one of those courses. I haven't really noticed a big change, for at least from the curriculums that I've seen. I'm doing quadratic functions right now. Do you have any tips? I think the biggest thing with quadratics is one, obviously, having a strong foundation with factoring. I mean, obviously, you're going to get into, there's graphing and, factoring and simplifying and solving and quadratic formula, completing the square. But I think one of the biggest things that students still have a struggle with after they've left learning quadratics is just factoring. So if you can over practice on factoring trinomials, I think you'll have a good foundation of majority of the content that you're probably going to see. And obviously there's a lot more with quadratics, but I would definitely say that factoring quadratics is probably the biggest weakness for students that I've seen across the board. And so I would just overly practice those to make sure that you're always, no matter what grade you get on the other stuff and what stuff is still kind of iffy, that you have that good solid foundation for factoring. Thank you so much for all of your online videos, because if it wasn't for them, I would have never passed. But I only have one question. Why don't you feel excited to teach anymore? So I wouldn't say the question is I don't feel excited to teach anymore. I would say I didn't have the passion for the day in, day out grind of teaching. And because teaching is a lot of work, it requires a lot out of the teachers, and you might not see it. And if you don't see it, that means you have a really, really good teacher, because, teaching is performance. I mean, every single day you're showing up and, you're selling education to students that more or less, at least in the American educational system, like don't really care, don't really want it. They have other things going on, especially in their pocket or in their book bag, that is more interesting to them than what you're trying to put in front of them. And always just throwing the grade as a carrot over the stick, doesn't always work for every student. And students have difficulties. They have home life that is, a challenge. A lot of kids don't care, and you have to motivate them, and they come to you with their problems. It's a day in, day out grind. And I love teaching. I really, truly miss the time that I had inside the classroom. But I also think that, as we go through life, and I guess now I feel old saying that, because I'm 40 years old, but I also feel like, we have things that we're designed to do, or we feel like we get pulled to, do certain things. But I don't feel, just like I was talking about with the grade, I don't feel like a certain time in your life or certain decisions you make at any point in your life, like, need to define who you are and what you're going to do with the rest of your life. I have a lot of things that I still enjoy that I want to explore. Obviously, I love having the opportunity to be able to do these live streams and communicate with people all over the world. I have a big passion for improving math education all over the world. And, teaching, now that I had my 3 children, my Sundays, I don't get to spend as much time with them. I'd be grading papers and tests, and getting ready for the upcoming week, doing my teacher planning. And then you're teaching all day and you're exhausted. And then you come home and then you got to be a father to your children, have dinner. And it was just at that point for me to be able to achieve the things that I wanted to achieve. I just didn't feel like I was 100% committed to my students anymore. And I felt like that is the worst thing that my students, or not, I wouldn't say the worst thing. That is the thing that my students do not deserve from me. Students deserve teachers that are committed to them. And if I don't feel I can bring that commitment to them, I have to remove myself from the classroom. And that's what I did. I am doing very good. Hope you're doing all right as well. What's the most effective way to memorize stuff in geometry? I don't know if this is the most effective way, but I remember when I first started teaching geometry, we had to create like a little toolkit booklet. And every single time we had a form, a theorem, a postulate, any definition, like we wrote them down in this toolkit. And that was a great way just to organize everything throughout the year. Hold on, I got a child that's interrupting me. Yes, Ada? I think she's upstairs. Okay. And so I would just recommend like writing them down in the toolkit. Obviously, in my other classes, I create like cheat sheets where we can do kind of like the exact same thing. But I think if you can have something that is a simplified version of all that information that you have to learn, because I will say that is one of the most common things that is a struggle for students learning geometry is remembering and how to apply all the information they are given to them throughout that course. So I think if you can organize them in a little toolkit or on some cheat sheets, something for you to consistently reference every day, I promise you throughout the year, if you keep on going back over and reviewing that stuff and doing problems with applying that stuff, you will have a better memory of the content. But if you just try to like cram it all in one night before an exam, it's going to be tough. Yes, I love it. Sure. Oh, yes. Hi, Miss McLogan. Are you currently a teacher or professor anywhere? I am no longer a teacher or a professor anywhere. So I taught 14 years in the classroom and I stepped away, I guess, 3 years ago. Yeah, three. This will be my third year stepping away. But my teaching certificate is still valid, I think, for 2 more years. So if you have any openings in your school and you want me to come over, let me know. Just joking, by the way. But I am a sub. You are very welcome to get on. Can you give online lessons or can you make videos for specific topics in math, such as limits, because I'm really not good at it? I would really be grateful, like really, really grateful. Well, if you do go to my channel, you go to playlist, I have a lot of videos on limits. I also have a calculus channel that I'm looking into adding some more videos on limits, derivative, integrals, and all the other kind of stuff. So you can go and find all that information on my YouTube channel. So I would just recommend going there. And then, yeah, I don't teach online classes. I just kind of, I got out of the teaching because my time, I didn't like having the rigid like structure of my time and what I need to be done. And like, I have a lot of demands going on with my family and, other things that I have outside of YouTube. And so having something that's even why, like on these live streams on Sunday, I used to do 9 p.m. For anybody that remembers when I did 9 p.m. every Sunday, please let me know in the comments down below. I love the OGs, as I would say. But yeah, I probably for over a year, I did live streams at 9 p.m. because the reason why is that's when my daughters would go to bed. So that's when I could actually do a live stream. Well, now I just basically do them whenever I have a free hour on my Sunday. And sometimes you'll notice I don't have a free hour on my Sunday and I don't go live. And I used to hate that because I was so consistent with my Sunday live streams, but now it's just the reality. And so I hope you guys understand that. So that would kind of go to the same question. No, I don't technically do tutoring. I do have some ideas though for helping some students out, which I have helped out for free. But that's kind of a case by case situation. Why do so many people find Calc 2 to be the hardest calc out of all? Is it as complex as people make it seem, or is it only too much information given in a short period of time? Well, I don't know. I mean, I took Calc 1 and Calc 2 when I was in college, so they're full semester courses. I will say that Calc 2 is going to, I will say like the complex more, like it's going off of that you have a solid understanding of your Calc 1 information, right? So when you're taking Calc 1 and you're just taking Calc 1, you do have a little bit more time to like digest the information and to understand it in more of a fundamental way. Whereas once you get into Calc 2, it's like you're supposed to know this stuff. So we're moving on. Like we're teaching these concepts. Obviously, when you talk about Calc like A, B, and BC, that is going to be much more of a pacing issue to be able to digest and understand the information. I'm not fully sure the best question on this, but I would say the step function is one of those that a lot of students have struggled with. And it's just kind of like that stepchild that's like, yeah, let's include the step function here and there, but we don't really do much with it outside of that, you know? So it's kind of always an awkward transition inside of a classroom. Well, thanks, Joakim. I have a question. Which trig function should I use when I'm solving for theta in related rates? I don't remember my calculus. Sorry, I'm not, I mean, as far as I remember with my related rates issue, I mean, you're going to, I'm not seeing anything would be a different function over the other, but that's just drawing off my memory. It's been about 5 years since I taught calculus, so sorry. Yeah, I get it. It's just, it's time consuming. So I do plan on, you know, making some courses, at least online, and providing them on YouTube for you guys. But I still have motivation to teach. I mean, that's why I still do every single day is make math videos. But yeah, I think just the demands of being inside of a classroom is, even though I miss the performance of that, the demands of having to show up every single day is kind of, it's hard. Well, awesome, Abby. So happy to help you out. Not sure. I will have to go and check that out. Actually, I haven't heard about that. Well, awesome. Thank you very much. Sartha, you're the best. Thank you for all the videos that you created. Also, the asymptote always going to be 0. I don't know what asymptote you're referring to. Which way my inequality should go? I need a little bit more context. And so if you guys do have some questions, math questions, then feel free to go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. And if you do have another question, feel free to add it, continue adding it inside the chat, guys. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my whiteboard and I'm going to get to some of your guys' math questions. So if you submitted a math question at brianmclogan.com/Q&A, then I will go over that right meow. Let me put that over there. Where is this? Put that over there. There we go. We'll move. And then, you know what I'll also do is I'll do see if I can find. There you go. Cool. So now if you have a question, this is for math questions. If you have another random question, then feel free, guys, just to put it down in the chat. I'll be able to answer your questions from on there. Okay. Cool. And sometimes I'm taking some of these videos and I'm making a math video out of it. So that's something new that I have. All right. Let's see what you guys got for me here. Word problem. So what are you giving me word problems for? Come on, this is a Sunday before Thanksgiving break. I don't really like doing some word problems. I would need to go and read through that and break through it. Sorry, that's just going to take too much of my time. Sorry. I know that's probably something you want me to do, but I really, really do not like doing word problems on the live stream. One, I got to read through everything, and then it usually takes over this. But here's that question you're talking about on pre-calculus, so that's awesome. I'll go through that. Without calculator, determine the domain of the function. Express the domain of interval notation. All right, you're giving me a lot of problems to go through. So I will do the top one and I will watch the chat. If you have another question that was like, I rather prefer you do this one instead, then let me know. Okay. So this question says, find the domain. Okay. All right. So there's two different things that we have. All right. And A and D, I will. Absolutely. So I'll go back and do D for you as well. So it says find the domain. So there's two things that we need to understand, right? So we have a square root and we have a rational function. Okay. Now, there are domain restrictions for these two. Whenever you have a square root, we know that everything that is under the radical has to be greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0. Whenever we have a rational function, we have a variable in the denominator, we know that x cannot equal 0. So our domain restriction, is, for this case, x has to be greater than 0. In this case, x can be anything but 0. All right. So what I'm simply going to do is notice I have a radical in the numerator, and then I also have this x plus 2 in the denominator. So what I can do is I can do a couple things. Here, I want to find out, well, what values are going to make this positive? So I have an x squared minus a 16 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then over here, I know it can't equal to 0, but I want to be able to find out, well, which values are going to make my denominator equal to 0? So I'll set an equation, x plus 2 is equal to 0. Because if I can find the values that make my denominator equal to 0, I'm going to exclude them from my domain. So obviously, let's do this one first because it's kind of easy. So subtract a 2 and say, hey, when x equals -2, my denominator is 0, right? And that makes sense because when you plug in -2 in for your denominator, -2 plus 2 equals 0. That's going to be -2 plus 2 equals 0. So therefore, that's going to be undefined. So we can write this domain in interval notation as, let me make sure, sorry. I open that up, I want to make sure. Okay. So interval notation will look like this: -infinity to -2, union -2 to infinity. And then, and then over here, now this is where it gets a little difficult, because how do we solve a quadratic inequality? The best way to solve a quadratic inequality would be to go ahead and graph what this graph is going to look like to find, to look at the graphical form. So if I were to graph this, let's go ahead and rewrite this as an equation. X squared minus 16 equals 0. Hopefully you see that this can be factored into an x minus 4 times x plus 4. So those are going to be my intercept. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see there's going to be a y-intercept there of -16. So it'd be like down there. So this graph, x squared minus 16, would look like this. So this is saying that x is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Well, when? Well, it's going to be greater than or equal to 0 when my x values are less than -4 and greater than -4. So I have this in interval notation is -infinity to -4 union 4 to infinity. Okay, so now if I want to be able to identify what exactly is this domain, I need to find the intersection of these two domain restrictions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph the blue first, I'm going to graph the red, and then I'm going to find, well, where do they intersect? So this would look like this. If this is 0, so we would have a -2 and a +2. And we would go like this. And then this one, the red domain, would look something like this. If here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you say, all right, well, when are these going to intersect? Well, they're not going to both be true at 0, right? Nothing's true at 0. This one's not true at -2, but this one's not true. They're both not true at 2 or -2. What about at -3? Well, at -3, this one's true, but this one is not true. So the domain that would supersede this was going to be this restriction. So this would be your domain interval, because this, if you notice, this, for all the values where this is true, this domain restriction is also true, but that's not the case vice versa. So that would be the domain. So the domain would be this for those two. Okay. Now I see a lot of questions coming in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. I see a lot of questions go in the chat that are math questions. These have all been submitted at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. You guys can see the link right above my head, or it's also in the description. Please go ahead and submit those in there. I'm not going to have time to go back to your chats and go back through them. I am literally just looking at the Google form and answering questions from there. So if you have a math question you want me to get to, put in there. If you have some other question related to math and blah, 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 then feel free to put that into the chat. All right, let's go and see what your D was. All right, so D, I like D. That's a good question. So let me take D. Okay, so for this problem, we need to go ahead and find the domain. So again, we have two restrictions, right? So we have a square root and we have a 1 over x. So just remember, when anything's under a radical, we know that x has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then when x is in the denominator, we know that x cannot equal 0. These are your two domain restrictions for these two functions. So we kind of have one function inside the other, right? We have a radical in the denominator. So what's important is the restriction for the radical is x has to be greater than or equal to 0. But when we know that the radical is in the denominator, we can't have it equal to 0, right? So what we're simply going to do is we're going to change this restriction to x has to be greater than 0, because we can't have this equaling 0. Because it's equal to 0, then it's going to be undefined. So all we simply need to do is say, all right, what values for under my radical is greater than 0? So I have x minus 7 has to be greater than 0. Again, not greater than or equal to 0, because we don't want that to be 0, because square root of 0 is 0, then you're dividing by 0. So you can't do that. So all you're going to do is take our domain restriction, x minus of has to be greater than 0, whatever's under radical, take whatever expression I have under there, and now I just need to solve. So x plus 7. So therefore I have x has to be greater than 7, and then now if I look at a number line, let's just put a 7 here. X has to be greater than 7. Oops, what am I doing? That has to be an open circle. And that's going to be all the values going over to the right. So in interval form, that would be a, what am I doing? In interval form, that would look like a 7 to a infinity. All right. Oh, put that on the wrong one. Let's see what other questions you guys got. Another word problem. Why do you guys give me word problems? I don't have time for some word problems today. Got to get to questions soon. What is the problem? I'm most of figuring out the bearings. Again, another word problem. I will work on the word problems, guys. It's just they're not good for live streams. They would make this live stream like double the length. Let's see. All right, that was the one I got from on there, so that's good. Okay. Okay. All right. Solve this quadratic inequality. Another quadratic inequality. Okay. So we have solve, and the quadratic inequality that was submitted is -4x squared plus a 23x less than 15. Okay, so if I'm going to solve this, a couple things that I'm going to want to look at is I don't want to worry about it being a quadratic or the inequality right now. What I want to do is just kind of find the intercepts. Where is this graph crossing the x-axis? And then what is that orientation going to look like? So I'm going to rewrite it as an equation because I want to be able to find the values where the graph is going to cross that x-axis. So let's go ahead and rewrite this as a quadratic equation plus a 23x is equal to 15. All right, so if I want to make it equal to 0, that's going to give me the intercepts. So I have a negative 4x squared plus a 23x minus a 15 equals 0. Now, the cool thing about finding the zeros is it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. The graph is still going to, that's just going to be a reflection about the x-axis. So what I can do is actually I can divide by -1 on both sides because I don't really want to do factoring with negative a as in there. So I'm going to divide out a -1 on both sides. So it's going to give me a positive 4x squared minus a 23x plus 15 equals 0. Okay, so I'm just going to do some of my mental process here to try to see which would make sense. And already I am seeing, because I've had a lot of practice with doing math, that I'm having some opportunity. So we have to multiply two numbers to give you 4x squared, I have a 4x and a positive x. And then if I'm thinking about 15, I could do, 15 and 1 or 5 and 3. I'm already recognizing if I do a 4 times 5, that's going to give me a 20, and a 3 times x is going to give me a 3x, right? So 20 plus 3 would be a 23x or 23. So, but I need to make that to be a negative. So therefore, I'm going to need both factors to be negative. So this is going to be a -5, and this would be a -3. Now I can apply my zero product property. So I can get a 4x minus a 3 equals 0. Ax minus 5 is equal to 0. And therefore, this would be, let's just do the work. So add a 3 to both sides. 4x equals 3. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. X equals a 3/4. And then over here, add a 5 to both sides. X is going to equal to a 5. Okay. So what I have here is, if we look at this equation in this format, let me actually look at it this way. So if I look at this in an equation, it'd be y equals a -4x squared plus a 23x minus a 15. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to. I have two intercepts, 5 and 3/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then a 3/4 would be like right there. Now, the thing is, does the graph opening up or is it opening down? Well, if you were to look at this in terms of the equation form, notice that my a is negative, right? So therefore, I know this graph is opening down. Okay? So whenever I'm solving an inequality, I want to be able to identify this from 0. So what I'm going to do is just subtract a 15 on both sides. And we're going to look at answering the question here. So -4x squared plus a 23x is less than a -15. I'm sorry. Minus a 15 is going to be less than 0. So basically what we want to be able to identify is, when is this graph less than 0? If I plug in x values, right, along this x-axis, for what x values, when I'm plugging in them, am I going to get a y value that would be less than 0, or an output that would be less than 0? Well, hopefully you recognize that's going to occur at, not at -3, or not at 3/4, but anything less than 3/4, and then not at 5, but anything greater than 5. All right. So if I'm going to write that as an interval, I would say, well, that'd mean my solution here is going to be from -infinity to positive 3/4, but it's not included. So I'm going to use a parentheses. And then my other solution is going to be a 5 all the way to infinity. And again, these represent x values that are going to satisfy this equation. And then I can bring a union to combine them together. All right. More questions are coming in. I just answered that question. Well, I didn't answer that question. It's the same one. So I just did an inequality. Applied the same process. I don't know what I'm asking. You're not asking. You just gave me an equation, acid. So I'm not sure what you want me to do. Graphing, solving, domain. You got to be very specific in your description in your things. What does the problem refers to the variable r? How would you approach this problem? I don't know. Let's go and see. For each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation xy plane? I would have to spend time looking over reviewing that. Sorry, that's just going to take a little too long on the live stream. Second one that's long. Are you asking me again another one of these? Second one, I don't understand. All right, well, this is a piecewise function, so this is different. All right, we got to graph the piecewise function. This is long. All right, let's graph a piecewise function. I love graphing piecewise functions. All right, before I get into this, let me get to a couple of your guys' questions that you guys had onto there, see if there's anything I missed. And I'll get to you guys' questions in just a second. I promise. How can I master trig? Well, thanks, Abdel. Asymptote, so going to be 0. Well, awesome. So happy to help you out. Hey, can you constrain optimization how to? Do I say going back to college in my late 30s was so scary. You helped me so much prepping for grad school. I'm fearful again. Can you recommend a comprehensive post-high school resource full adult learners? I am sorry, I do not have any recommendations for that. It's not something I just have familiarity with. So best of luck going back. I love it that you are embarking on the journey, and I wish you the best of luck. I apologize. I just don't have any good recommendations I would stand behind. Yep. Feel free to submit it at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Have a specific problem, submit it, and I'll be happy to look at it. Go ahead and submit it, and I'll try to do my best. The blue number line is incorrect, I think. I don't know which one you're thinking about. I hope not. I mean, I checked it last week, so I hope it's not overwhelmed. Awesome. So happy to help you out. Thank you very much. Hey, Mr. Golden, kind of off question, but I was wondering if you're still teaching in schools. No, I'm sorry. Just on YouTube now. I don't know what that means. Could you go through 2023? How is it greater if it's going down? Well, let me go and see what I'm talking about. So obviously 2 people are mentioning that. So let's go and look at. Oh, yeah, you're right. Wait. Greater than going to 0. That's for it to be less than 0. This is when x squared is greater than 0. Yeah, so it's opening up. I don't know. If I'm making a mistake, let me know. I'm not seeing the mistake that I made. So let me know. Submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Well, awesome, Prem. Good to have you on. Thank you so much. All right, back to your guys' questions. Piecewise function. All right, so to do this problem, what I'm going to do is remember a piecewise function is just all a piecewise function is, guys, is just a set of multiple functions with domain restrictions. So we have 3 functions going on. Y equals negative 2x minus 6, y equals absolute value of x, and y is equal to 4. And then we have a domain restriction where this says this graph is only true for x values that are less than or equal to negative 4. This is only true for x values from negative 4, for x values that are larger than negative 4, but less than or equal to 2. And this one is only true for x values that are greater than 2. So let's go ahead and graph each one, and then we'll apply the domain restriction, and then we'll put them all on one graph. So whenever you're doing first learning piecewise functions, it's a little bit more work, but I recommend doing this. It's kind of helpful. So this one goes down to negative 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now this is for x values that are less than or equal to negative 4. So I don't want to go to the right? I don't want to go up and down to the right. I have to go to the left. So it's a negative slope. So I'm going to do up 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's my y-intercept. So up 2 to the left one, up 2 to the left one, up 2 to the left one, and then I got to go up 2 to the left one. Okay, so that graph looks like that. However, the domain restriction says, no, I only want x values for when x is less than -4. Well, here's when x is -4. So I only want x values that are less than -4. So my graph is only going to be true, less than or equal to, sorry, for x values that are at -4 or less than. And you can see that point is at what? -4, 3. All right. The next one is the absolute value graph. So the absolute value graph, remember, is the V-shaped graph, right? So it has a slope of like 1/1 in both directions. And it's going to look something like that. Okay. So, but it says, I only want this graph to be true between x values of -4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And between 2, +2. And then so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. However, -4 is not included. So we're going to have so that's a graph. So we're only going to include it from -4. -4 is not included. So it's an open circle. And then all the way to the x value of 2, which is going to be included. So that's going to look like that. And then last but not least is we have y is equal to 4. So we're going to want to graph that one. And remember, y equals 4 is just going to be a horizontal line because y is always equal to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Which point should be -4, 2? Oh, good catch on that. Oh, my graph. So up to -1, up to -1, up to, thank you, good catch. Up to, you're right. You're good. Good catch, Aroff. Thank you so much. That's why we don't do graphing with incorrect stuff on here. So yeah, I didn't go up to, my pacing was a little off. Thank you. So -4, 2. So then y equals 4. You want me to find the range of this too? Is that for this question or something else? All right, I'll find the range. So now we have all three of these graphs. Now let's just go and combine them on the same y and our x and y axes. So it's always kind of helpful to have those points consideration. A lot of times if you had more space, you could just put them all in the same graph together. And then typically once you kind of know how to do this, I'd prefer just doing it right on there. But we have this one graph. This is at what? -4, +4. This point is going to be at 2, 2. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put the restriction in here, didn't I? I'm just going too fast. So this is going to be y equals 4. So that looks like that. However, the domain restriction says only for x values that are greater than 2. So I go where x is greater than 2, put an open circle, and then it's going to go that way because that's for all x values that are greater than 2. And that comma point is going to be 2, 4. Okay, so we have -4, 2. So let's go and do that. So -4 and 2, 3, 4, +2, contained, included circle. No, it's not the right slope. It's like a -2/1. I'm just doing a rough sketch, okay? Then I have this other point, -4, 4. And then that's going to go to my V-shaped graph, and that's going to go to 2, 2. And then at 2, 4, I have an open circle, and then the graph looks like that. Ooh, kind of cool, right? So even though my graph, if you can see though, even though my graph does have some jump discontinuities, the domain is defined for all real numbers. So if you did want to find the domain, even though we have these jumps, at -4, it's defined here. It's not defined there. At 2, it's defined here, not there. So my domain is going to be from -infinity to infinity. Does it have to be 3, 4? Because it says greater than 2 on the last one. No. So it could be like 2.0001, right? 2.0001 is greater than 2. So that's why we use the open dot. It's just saying 2 is not included, but any measurable thing just over a little bit larger than 2 is going to be true. So we're thinking decimal fractional values, not just integer cases. And then, however, my range is going to be basically, well, how high does this graph go? How low, or basically how low does this graph go to how high it goes? And you can see the graph is only going to be defined at 0. That's the lowest value it goes. And then as going up, even though I have these gaps, I have a gap here and a gap here. However, I do always have a y value that is defined for that. So since I have a y value that is defined, I don't have any breaks in my range. So my range is going to be from 0 all the way to infinity. Hopefully that was helpful. All right. More questions coming in. What Lucy to be true about P? Greater than 0. I need to work on that. That's a good question, but I just need to look at something. I would like to, for me to be able to graph that, I want to make a thing. There was a question on there. I just need to look at it. Use synthetic division to divide. Sketch the graph with the appropriate end behavior, labeling the x and the y intercepts. I wouldn't. Long division with that is going to take way too long. I do like that problem, so I might make a video on that. But sir, I'm not going to do a long division. That's going to be a long problem, and I am kind of at my end at the moment. But I probably will make a video for that one because I like that problem. All right. Graph the inequality. Write the coordinates of 3 points that satisfy the inequality. Okay, let's go and do this one. I'm just trying to do things that I can do rather quickly for you guys. Ooh, when free tutoring. Oh, I guess I started. Look at all these math problems I've done. Holy moly. This is a really big document. Throughout all the years. $139 pages. Pretty cool. All right. So when you have to graph an inequality, all I simply want you to think about is, well, why don't we just go ahead and think about graphing the equation, and then we can adjust with the inequality, okay? So and this is going to be for y values that are going to be less than 0. All right. So first of all, let's graph y equals x minus 2 quantity squared minus 1. Well, hopefully you recognize the parent graph looks like this. That's y equals x squared. Okay. Now there's a couple points that are kind of important. We have 0, 0, which is the vertex. We have this point, 1, 1. This point, negative 1, 1. So we have 1, 1. And this point is going to be a negative 1, 1. And Araf, I like that question. All right, I like that comment. I might. I know. I got to do some things to get into there. But I like that. So negative 1, 1 and 1, 1. And so I want you to understand those 3 points. So if there is not a horizontal stretch or compression of your graph or a reflection, those points are going to be true. So if you're only having transformations shifting the graph right, left, up, or down, these points are going to move in that element. So when I look at the graph, y equals x minus 2 quantity squared minus 1, what is that doing to that graph? Well, it's shifting the graph 2 units to the right and then down 1. So all 3 of those points are now going to shift 2 units to the right and down 1 unit. So this graph is going to look like this. So my vertex has now been shifted over 2 units to the right and then down 1 unit. This point has been shifted over 2 units to the left, 2 units to the right, and then down 1 unit. So that's going to be there. And this one's been shifted 2 units to the right, 2, 3, and then down 1 unit. So you can see that the graph looks like this. Now, again, I kind of looked ahead with this graph. These are the 3 most common points. And notice it says right corners for 3 points to satisfy the inequality. Voila, here we go. Now, again, this is saying when is y value going to be less than 0? Well, look at guys. All my x values that are between -3 -1 and 3 are going to satisfy that, or less than or equal to, right? So my inequality is going to be from -3, -1. What about negative? What am I talking about? It's x values. When we're looking for what are the x values that satisfy when the y values are negative. I'm confusing up my space. So 1, 3. Those are the x values for when the y value is negative. So my 3 points that would satisfy that, I would just do 1, 0. I would do the vertex, which is 2, -1. And or write the coordinates of 3 points. Coordinates of 3 points. Okay. And then I do 1, 2, 3, 3, 0. And again, you can plug those into the inequality and see. All right. All right, let me see if I can answer any other questions rather quickly. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to all your guys' questions. Well, I got 2 more. No more questions added on. Sorry. Can you solve for r in the function? Okay. CM. I'll need to look at that one. What is your radical? Is that over everything on there? I need to know what your radical is over. So if you can verify that for me, then I will know. Then it'll help me out. All right, optimization is some word problem. That's way too long, so I'm not going to get to that. Let me see what other questions I have from you guys, and then I'll wrap up the stream. For part C, I think the blue number line is correct. For part C. Oh, crap. That's way up there. I'm not going to get to that. Best of luck. Yes, for sure. I know how to simplify radicals, but when there's fractions, I don't know how anymore. We'll submit a question, brianclogan.com/Q&A. I won't do it this week, but I'll do it next. I promise. Just like you'd study any other math. I don't know. I hate stats. Sorry. All my stats teachers. What advice would you give? I'm intrigued and understand the content, but I don't do as well on the test. Practice more. Practice over practice, right? You got to really get this stuff to settle in on your brain. So practice, practice, practice more. What am I doing? There you go. So practice, practice, practice. Yes, but if you have a specific question, submit it to brianclogan.com/Q&A. I already responded to this, but I like this idea. You showed the question I served in the previous live stream. I am not sure which question it was, so I apologize for that. Did you put your name in it? I'll be able to take a look. I did some do videos. I didn't get to do a lot, so some of them I made some YouTube videos on, but I'm not sure if I got to everybody's question. If it was very like complex, or if it was like a word problem, I most likely did not get to it. I do have some videos. I have an SAT, ACT prep list, but I would not say my channel, like, I don't like to devote a lot of my time to study prep. That's just not a big focus for me. Yeah, you can do table of values to find the other points. Absolutely. Hey, teacher, I got a phobia of math where I get anxious and I'm unable to solve a problem. It also happened before a test, and sometimes I have to skip the test. Thank you for any advice. I think I talked about this earlier. I think just being able to like control and your breathing, make sure you're getting a good night's rest. Make sure you do some visualization, close your eyes, relax the best you can. In the end, I think sometimes it helps working through these problems under pressure, and it gets a little bit better as you go through things, but it's difficult. And I can totally relate to you as well. So I think one big thing that I always tell students when they're taking a test is to do those breathing treatments to really try to calm themselves down. But I also think that when you over practice and you're over prepared for your test, that also gives you a lot more confidence in there, that you're just going to do the best you can do, and whatever happens, happens. You're going to survive at the end of it. Well, awesome, DT. I'm so happy to help you out. What's with the stats teacher hate? I love stats teacher. Well, I'm not a stat. I was saying I hated stats, so I apologize to all of any stat teachers that are listening or anybody that loves stats. I don't know. I just didn't connect with it. I don't know. Stats and physics were just. I love math. I love math, but stats and physics, I think because they're more application kind of based, and I don't really like applied mathematics in that way. I don't know. I just don't have the affection for them as like I do as like general mathematics. So anyways, well, thank you so much everybody for joining in. Hopefully I was able to help some of you out with your questions, and I really appreciate you guys spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Cheers.